If you'd like to, it's up to you, but if you'd like to show your video, you're very welcome to. As the Buddhist Society pointed out to me, it's a way of sharing our being together, even though we're on Zoom. So it's up to you, but nice to see you if you do. And it's nice to see you even if you don't, even though I can't see you, because I can imagine that at least you're there. So welcome. And we'll make a start. So what I'll do, just in case anyone's new to the group, I'll start by chanting the dedication offerings and the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts. And I'll guide a meditation, or talk say a few things about what occurs to me, and then open it up for a discussion so that you're free to unmute yourselves when the time comes to speak, to ask questions and things like that. To the Blessed One, the Lord, who fully attained perfect enlightenment, to the teaching which he expounded so well, and to the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, to these, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, we render with offerings our rightful homage. It is well for us that the Blessed One, having attained liberation, still had compassion for later generations. May these simple offerings be accepted for our long-lasting benefit and for the happiness it gives us. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and Blessed One, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Dhammang saranang gacchāmi, Sangham saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammam saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sangham saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammam saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sangham saranang gacchāmi. Panatipata Veramani Sikkhabadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Arinna dana veramani sikkhapada samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kamesu michachara veramani sikkhapada samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musavada veramani sikkhapada samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Sura Maria Majjapamaditana Veramani Sikkhavadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani Pancha Sikkhavadani Silena Sugatinyanti Silena Bhogasampada Silena Dibhutinyanti Tasma Silang Visodaye. These are the 5 precepts. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of true wealth. Virtue is the source of peacefulness. Therefore let virtue be purified. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So this evening, I'll give the encouragement to relax into the body, the encouragement to notice our experience, and the encouragement to relax the mind, to notice what arises in the mind. And the question to explore, I think, is do we need to control the mind? Is that the purpose of meditation? So, to calm the mind and calm the body, and the two things go hand in hand. When the mind calms down, the body becomes calm. When the body is calmed down, it supports the calming of the mind. When we begin our meditation, it can be helpful to use the word relax. When we say relax, we can apply that both to the mind and to the body. We're heading in the direction of calming. We begin with a restless mind, restless body. And so we deliberately calm down. We can do that most easily by connecting the mind with the body, bringing our attention into the body so that we experience mind and body as one. rather than as two separate things. And we notice the experience of the body with the mind. The experience of the body is made up of awareness of the posture, awareness of sensation, awareness of the breath. When we're aware of the posture, the awareness itself can bring the posture into alignment. We don't really need to think of it as doing something, but discovering a point of balance, a natural, upright, and balanced posture. Not one that's strained, but aware and awake. Take the posture for granted. When we're sitting, we can give close attention to whether we're leaning forward or back, to one side or another, trying to tease out what that point of balance is as a felt sense. Where is that? How does that feel? When we know it, then it's something we can return to. When we notice the posture is out of alignment, when we notice that we're leaning forwards, then we can bring the body back upright over and over again without judging our slumped posture as a failure, but simply an opportunity to bring it back to that point of balance. We do this in a gentle and kind way, because the upright posture supports our practices, energizing, it's beneficial. So it's kind to return to that upright posture. Bring our mind to the sensations in the body, to notice tension in the legs or in the arms, around the face. Wherever there's a tightness, there's an opportunity to release, to unclench that muscle, those muscles. An invitation to let go of tension in the body. We may receive messages from the body, such as areas of pain, discomfort, itching. Be curious about these things, about how they manifest, how they change. An itch appears here and then somewhere else. What's irritating one minute has disappeared the next. We can notice inhalation and exhalation. Sometimes the inhalation is long, the exhalation is long. Sometimes it's short. And don't need to interfere with this. Not interfering, but noticing the breath. Thoughts may arise in the mind. We may call them distracting. When we do that, then we're critical of those thoughts. We think they shouldn't be there. They're getting in the way. This is an attitude towards the mind. Is that helpful? Is it better to criticize and judge, or better to accept and notice? Simply notice. Thoughts arisen, manifest, disappeared. Should you control the mind? Or should you just notice how it is? Is that a question you've ever considered? Or do you just act automatically to control, thinking you have to control? Trying to stop thoughts arising. Just using the word distraction suggests something undesirable, thoughts getting in the way. But what if you gave them permission to come and go? Not making anything out of them. But seeing the thoughts as the natural expression of the mind. Inevitable mental activity. That will calm in its own time when we don't interfere. Inviting the mind to relax, to calm down. Rather than judging it. Just an invitation, gentle, kind invitation to calm, still. Let go of its busyness. Perhaps you have thoughts like, I should and shouldn't do, shoulds and shouldn'ts. It should be like this, it shouldn't be like that. A world of should and ought. It oughtn't to be this way. But if it oughtn't to be this way, it wouldn't be this way. It's whatever it is, it's something we can learn from. We can open up to our experience. Do we need to control the mind, or just notice how it is? How would it be if we stopped inventing the shoulds and shouldn'ts until I stopped telling our minds how it should or shouldn't be? and just noticed and accepted the way it is. When we accept things the way they are, they don't stay the same. We realize that what we're accepting is change, uncertainty. Even the don't know mind, not knowing, accepting that rather than pretending that we know when we don't. Letting acceptance be our guide, our willingness to let go. Ding. 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 So what comes to my mind is when I was beginning my meditation, when I was first taught to meditate, my recollection is that I was, at least the understanding I had was that I should control the mind. I learnt I should try to control the mind, and my experience was I couldn't do it. I remember trying to counting the breaths to 10, I think, and then down again, and finding I couldn't, like I wouldn't be able to get to 10 before I lost count. It wasn't like I couldn't do it for a certain length of time. I couldn't do it at all. And so I felt like that meditation was an exercise in humiliation, because that just showed you, how out of control my mind was. And I remember somebody telling me that they went to when they were in Ladakh, they went to a temple. They were taught to meditate. They sat there for a few hours, and then all he experienced was his mind going yap, yap, yap all the time. and he never wanted to meditate again. He told me this a few years later. That's what he experienced, and that put him off meditation. So there is that idea, I think, that meditation is about learning to control the mind. And there's quite a lot of supporting evidence in the Buddhist texts to say that a controlled mind brings happiness. There's no such incredibly beneficial thing. I think at the beginning of the Anguttara, it's one of the Book of the Ones, to control the mind is a great source of happiness. That the first two verses of the Dhammapada talk about how if we speak and act with a heart of a defiled mind, then suffering follows. If we speak and act with a pure mind, a happiness follows. And that suggests that we should control the mind, doesn't it? That we should get rid of defilements and we should purify the mind. And so it seems reasonable to embark on a kind of battle with the mind, thinking I've got to get rid of these defilements, because we can read a list of defilements, the Buddhist lists, one of many lists, and a long list of defilements, and recognize that, I've got all of those. So therefore I should definitely be doing something. I've got to control the mind so that these defilements don't arise. And then I'll have a pure mind and I'll be happy. That seems perfectly logical, reasonable, rational, and you can find it in the text there, right at the beginning, the first two verses of the Dhammapada. And when teaching meditation, I feel often a certain reluctance to teach techniques because of that, because I feel like these are techniques for controlling the mind. And why would I feel hesitation or reluctance in teaching that? I think it's because I've been there and done that. I feel like this is, it's not that it's not helpful to train the mind, because bhavana, the training of the mind, that's the name for meditation. Bhavana, it means mental training. It's not that it's not beneficial to train the mind, to train the mind so that we can be more awake and alert, calm and clear. It's not that those things are not beneficial, but because they can become an end in themselves. And in that way, they become a blind alley where you set somebody on a course to try to get something. They bring that conditioned way of trying to get and acquire something to their meditation practice. And they try to get and acquire a state of calm, for example. They try to get the mind, knock the mind into shape, try to control the mind. And it's not wrong to teach meditation techniques that teach us how to control the mind, but what's wrong is to stop there. What's wrong is to think that they're an end in themselves, because that's just a blind alley. It's first of all impossible. You're setting somebody on a course for suffering, because it isn't possible to control the mind. Can't be done. And it's not even in itself necessarily beneficial for its own sake. So, you can learn to concentrate so that you can kill people. It's not in itself beneficial. So it's a tool. Developing, training the mind is like sharpening a tool, but it's how you use it that matters. And meditation can be very limited if it's only about training the mind and controlling the mind. So as it's like a blind alley, I feel reluctant to teach it. I'm much happier teaching, opening up, learning to relax, let the sense of having to control the mind go, to experience the mind as it is, to know what it is, to encourage that attitude of investigation. Because for me, that's, if we have an attitude of investigation and curiosity, that sustains and supports our practice to a far more long-lasting and beneficial way. That attitude, developing the attitude of mind, this attitude of curiosity, investigation, a willingness to let go, a willingness to lose control. A willingness to open up to a mind where nothing's forbidden, where thoughts are not forbidden. If you have a way, if you're trying to control the mind, then inevitably you're going to resist thoughts. You're going to say certain thoughts are not allowed, especially if you've got a long list of defilements. Then you're going to say, oh, look, that's not allowed. No, that's not allowed. That's not allowed. And by doing that, you'll temporarily learn to concentrate, but you'll learn nothing from those things that are not allowed. You push them away. And by pushing them away, they'll come back stronger. So I saw an email from somebody recently who said that they had got very deep meditation experiences through concentration. But afterwards, they said afterwards, what should they do about all the unwholesome mental states that come back afterwards? When they experienced all these, they experienced lust and hatred, and they listed them. What should they do? How should they cope with that? Could somebody advise them how to deal with the mental states that arise after that period of concentration ends, when the mind's set free from the shackles of control? What happens then? Well, if you've never learned the tools of investigation, then you're completely floored when the mind comes back to its normal state. When the lust, hate, and delusion arises, you're completely floored because you've learned nothing from your concentrated state. All you've had is temporary blissful state of mind. And that sense of realization, that peacefulness, it's even more disturbing when that's shaken, I think, because you don't know what to do. You can't, what do you do? And so there's no path of understanding in that. So what I'm saying is, when we develop the right the right attitude towards the mind, then we've embarked on a path of understanding, a willingness to understand. So I think it's helpful. A helpful way to avoid the blind alley of trying to control the mind is to take a different attitude towards the mind. And I was very lucky that very early on, right at my first weekend retreat, after spending a weekend trying to follow instruction of controlling the mind, then a monk, a Burmese monk, invited questions. He wasn't leading the retreat, but he came and asked if anyone had any questions, and I explained my experience of my mind being all over the place, and I couldn't control it. And he said, "Oh, well, so you noticed the mind was all over the place then? So you noticed that? That was meditation." And then I thought, wow, this means that although I can't meditate, I've been meditating all the time, because even though my mind was all over the place, when I noticed that, I was practicing meditation. And this was like a door that opened, because it meant that rather than saying concentration was the only thing, that was all that meditation was, it meant that everything was meditation, because the mind that wasn't concentrated was also the meditative experience, because I could know that. I could know the mind, which was all over the place, and it was I could learn from it, because by noticing that, I could notice the experience of the mind that was all over the place. I could notice how that I could start to investigate what that really was, when the mind's instead of judging the mind that was all over the place, I could start to notice how it was. It was like a restless animal, but I could start to get a feel for it and start to watch and investigate how that was, and then it rather than create a monster out of it, which is what happens when you push things away and you try to control them. You turn them into monsters. I could start to make friends with it, start to realize that we were on the same side. Actually, my mind was all I had to work with. Why make it an enemy? Why do battle with the mind? Why not turn it into a friend and see what it would teach me? So changing my attitude to meditation practice meant not trying to control the mind, but starting to notice how it was. So I started to use things like the distracted mind as an object. I would experiment with things like that. I would say, this is the distracted mind. Okay, let me take that as a meditation object. Let me notice the distracted mind. And I'd play with that. And I'd realize we can't notice the distracted mind, because noticing isn't distraction. You can't, when you're noticing, you're not distracted. So when you notice the distracted mind, there is no distraction. It's not possible. And I'd experiment with these ways to practice, continually coming up with things, just questions like, so it's a good idea to control the mind. Just like to take that a kind of, so it is. So what that feels like, that assumption. How does that feel? What's that like? What does that do to me, to my mind, when I take that assumption and try and practice with that? What if I try to practice with the assumption of lose control? Just lose control. Just let it go. Let's assume that. Let's play with that. What's it like to lose control? To allow everything, to let everything in. That nothing's out of bounds, nothing's forbidden. Let the mind, whatever it is, let it come up. Let it be present. Let it be acknowledged. And I found that that was a better way to practice. I enjoyed that. I found that that was courage. It took courage, but it led to a better. I learned more from it, and I realized that it was possible. Actually, this idea of control was more about the sense of self, me being in control. There was a very big sense of self there, and that me being out of control was very frightening, but very helpful, in the sense that it meant surrendering, really, a kind of surrender. So you discover when you look at the mind, you get to investigate the self, because the sense of me and my mind. What do you get when the mind looks at the mind? When you turn the mind inward, then what you discover is it's the self looking at the self. It becomes that. You realize that it's your self is turning inward to look at the self, to investigate the self, and that there is it leads nowhere. There's no ultimate resolution there. It doesn't matter how far, how long the self looks at the self, how long the mind looks at the mind. You never reach the end. You'll never get to the end of that. The mind will never see the end of the mind. However long it looks, the self will never see the end of the self. However long the self looks, there's no end to that. You're left with not knowing. You can't. It's the unfathomable. Can't be fathomed. That the mind can't bring the mind to an end through looking at it. It doesn't. Nothing's destroyed. Nothing's lost. Nothing's broken. There's nothing. No harm. The mind's simply aware of itself. The self, the sense of me looking, never brings an end to the me that's been looked at. There's no end to it. It doesn't come to an end. Because it's then you can investigate. You can investigate. What is that then? If this thing, this mind that's looking at the mind, this self that's looking at this self, like a mirror, then you look at, like, if you could align these mirrors, that one after another would get smaller and smaller and smaller, but still never completely disappear. So then, is there something? What do we have to do? Is there anything we need to do about that? Anything we need to interfere with? Anything we've got to change or control? Does it matter? Isn't the desire to know just a desire? A kind of desire that leads to suffering? Isn't not knowing good enough? And when you realize something's let goable, and you know that when you let go, it just leads to release and freedom, then why wouldn't you let go? So when you turn the mind to investigate itself, you just think, if this doesn't lead me anywhere, let's just let go then. Why wouldn't you? There's nothing to hold on to, nothing to make out of it. To turn the self to investigate the self, and there's nothing there. So there's nothing to resolve, because the resolution is in just letting it go. There's nothing, it's like what's to be anxious about? Why would you create anxiety? What's to be stressed about? Why would you create stress? Well, where's the suffering? There's nothing to create suffering about. Why would you want to interfere with the mind? Why don't you just let it be? And when you realize that leads to understanding, to seeing things clearly, when you just let things be, you can see them as they are, then you realize this is a path of understanding. That it's not a path of fixing anything, of trying to get anything under control. That comes from the sense of self. Actually letting be and accepting is when everything ceases. There's nothing to fix, no problem to solve. And there's joy in that. I think, well, in that case, this is a good direction to head, isn't it? It's a sense of direction. I think, this is joyful. There's the direction that's heading towards stress and suffering, but this is heading to joy, peace. So why wouldn't you follow it? So that you end up just, as the Buddha said, you find, you see, you understand for yourself. You don't go by what people tell you. If you listen to somebody that tells you to meditate like this, and then you just know, well, that's what they said, but I'm going to find my own way. You've got to discover for yourself what's beneficial. Don't assume that you've understood what they meant. If it's not bringing you benefit, if not benefiting you, then you've probably misunderstood anyway. Or they didn't understand, and they didn't, whatever it was, they taught what was beneficial. But everything is a blind alley at some point. If you hold on to it, you've got to let it go. So that, and don't, when you're, ultimately, it's a bit like, there are many, coming down a mountain, there are many paths, but a lot of them lead to sheer edges. And they look like paths because they're well trodden. A lot of people have been there, they've got to the sheer edge, they've had to turn around and come back again. So it's a well trodden path, but it doesn't lead anywhere. So there are many paths, you might investigate them, but you've got to be willing to turn around and come back. But there's only one way, there's only one path down, and you've got to follow that path and be willing just to turn around and come back where it hasn't. It's led to, it hasn't, even though it seems a well-worn path, it's because everyone else has had to turn around too and come back. It doesn't make it the right way. So you have to find your own way, persevere, and don't trust what your own mind tells you, let alone what other people tell you, but keep on investigating. So if you learn that tool to investigate, I think that's the foundation of practice that will last and kind of the test of time. So if anyone's got any questions, can you unmute and ask them, please?
Hi, Martin. Hi, everyone.
I will.
Not a question as such, but just to say, the way you were describing your practice there really resonated with a lot of my experience, and I was really glad you mentioned that sort of experimental approach, because that's my sort of practice has definitely evolved like that, and I wonder, sort of, I looked at things like the foundations of mindfulness, for example, a sort of way to keep me in line when I feel like I'm going off on these tangents. So I sort of bring it back to the sort of foundations. But it was just interesting to hear you talk about these little paths and things you go down. So that was very useful. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. I find the foundations of mindfulness useful. I do, and I've read them carefully. I've read books about them. I've read books about really good, well-written books about the foundations of mindfulness, and it's continual source of investigation, isn't it? It's a fascination to look at those and to consider, and you always find there's something new in there when you look. So it's always good to go back and investigate these things and see if there's something we can learn from that. Yeah. And I find I use a lot of the teachings of the Buddha come to my mind during meditation practice as a guide, as I recognize them kind of heading in the direction of the 7 factors of enlightenment, for example, or away from the 5 hindrances, sort of recognizing that the kind of that sense of feeling of joy when joy arises, recognizing, oh, that comes out of energy. Yes, I know that. I'm experiencing that feeling. So knowing it and placing it within the teachings, things like that. It's very helpful.
I also wanted to say, Martin, thank you for describing your journey. It was very interesting, and you're pointing towards a method that's very free. You're pointing towards freedom with that journey of yours. It's not exactly the way that I have learned to meditate, but I think when you say relaxation, relaxing the body and relaxing the mind, that is a very important way to begin. But I think I really followed your journey step by step and understood it, and gave me a lot to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Well, it's everyone's journey is different. Everyone has to have their own journey. In fact, if I talked about my journey another day, it would probably become out different, because it's you can only talk about it the way it comes to you in the moment. But everyone's journey is different. Then we find our own way. We start from our own place and we begin in a different. But I think there are commonalities for that journey, and there are commonalities, and some of the things I talked about, like a willingness to let go and not to lose control. I think that's common. It's quite an interesting reflection on it's quite interesting how close that is to mental breakdown, like that, the sense of losing control, because people who with mental breakdown will feel like they lost control, the experience of losing control. And yet in meditation practice, we have to be willing to lose control. We have to be willing to step into the unknown, to walk off the edge. You can use different ways to describe it, to develop that confidence to do that. That's the key. So there are certain key things, aren't there? So we look at the teachings, you can see one of the things I like and often refer to are the 5 faculties, and that one of which is confidence or faith. That confidence is so important in giving us the confidence to develop our practice, and our meditation practice in particular. Self-confidence, that confidence to just trust that we don't have to, that we can step into the unknown, that we don't have to keep holding back, if you like. I think that fear is a very powerful and strong obstacle to practice, because often people will hold back in their meditation out of fear, because they're frightened of what might happen, of the experience that they've had, that maybe that experience, if they were to carry on letting go, it might go too far, and that they don't, it's out of lack of confidence they hold back. And so it's lack of confidence means fear, doesn't it? They're frightened to carry on, and that's so it's so important to keep cultivating that confidence, to develop the confidence that it's safe. Because if you're, if the difference between kind of mental breakdown and enlightenment is so fine, if you like, that letting go in trust, that actually it's okay. It doesn't matter, because you're willing to take the risk. And then because you know from experience that when you let go, no harm comes. It's always, your experience is that whenever you let go, you end up with that feeling of release and freedom. So then you trust that.
Could I just say something on that? Because I have a different experience, that when that moment may come when you feel that sense of release and that sense of joy, then the next time you sit, you want the same thing again, and then you're not afraid, you're anxious that you really want it too much, you're clinging to that idea, and you want to to experience it more. And that can be problematic.
Well, not really, because what you discover is that's the nature of the mind. Whereas if you're willing to investigate, you understand. You say, oh yeah, that's clinging, that's grasping, that's desire, that's what's manifest. Well, that's this. If you, what I'm doing is I'm trying to get and acquire and attain and achieve something because it was good in the past. So therefore, and it seems also like the mind is very convincing to the mind, because the mind easily convince you that that's the right thing to do. But the mind is confused with hindrance, with delusion. So the deluded mind is telling you that this is the right way. So what you do is you go back to the experience. So how did it arise? You realize, oh yes, joy, that freedom, that came from letting go. not from clinging, not from desire, not from grasping, not from trying to get something. In fact, it came out like almost as a sense of grace, as though it came from outside. It wasn't something I did. It happened, something that happened. It's though it happened to me. And so that's the direction of travel. You realize, it's all about letting go. So when I approach my meditation with a grasping mind, this is an opportunity to let go. So this is what you learn.
Yes, thank you. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have had experiences where I've had that experience from a particular way of breathing or something, and I've tried to repeat it by using the same method, and it doesn't work. So you then have to, as you say, you have to let go. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very beautiful practice. Thank you. It's nice of you to tell to say that for everyone's benefit, because I think Barbara, you can say something?
Yes, please. You talking about your journey made me, without doing anything, it brought back how I started off when I started meditating, and how surprised I was about the huge number of thoughts that would come into my mind that I hadn't realized, because in daily life you can easily discard them or just not notice them. And then when I sat down, I would realize there was this multitude of thoughts again. And gradually I realized that these thoughts were very similar. Each time when I sat down, there was a certain number of thoughts that would come back. And that to me was like, well, you better get on with it then and look what this means. What do they want? They want something from me. And so I became friends with these thoughts, and I found out what it really was about. And that was for me the first step to freeing my mind, to letting go. Because once I got to know myself better, I could say, thank you, that was very useful, and now you can go away. And so that was a very long process. I think it took me years to get there. But it, as you were saying, Martin, it never stops. We can't. One of my teachers once said, Barbara, can you empty your mind? Or, you get a glimpse of it. Then you're free. And there is nothing there. And that is a wonderful moment. And that has happened to me. And I think, well, something I would like again. And but I have learned that you can't want it or force it. It won't come. It's not something like that. It's just sitting and watching the breath, or having a mantra or something which helps you to stay in the moment and allows you to be in the moment, really, and become aware of what you do. And it's a wonderful moment when that happens. And that's really all I wanted to say. And thank you for making me aware of it again, how my path has been up till now, and how it has just it continues. If you continue with the sitting, it will happen. Something will happen.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm aware of time. Something that we can also let go of, but as it perhaps shouldn't let go of it as we have to bring it to a close, and I'll share the screen. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed One, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. So I just wanted to say that the Easter break is happening now, and I believe it lasts for 4 weeks. So that's quite a long holiday, isn't it? Enjoy yourselves. There's still, if you come to, there are events happening at the Amaravati, and there are Alba events. So do please keep in touch with those if you want to kind of do that. And but otherwise, as far as this is concerned, we'll be meeting again in 4 weeks.